Thank you, Nancy. Big thanks to Nancy and Martha for organizing this. Y'all give a little react with the hand claps if you can. Just love what Boots on the Ground is doing. My name is Wynn. I use they, them pronouns, and I am wearing a pink baseball cap and a showing up for racial justice hoodie. I got some swag on. I was born and raised on land colonized as Kansas City. And that land was stolen from indigenous peoples, including the Shawnee, Kickapoo, Kansa, Osage, Missouri, Wyandot, Oto, and Potawatomi. So I just want to recognize all these ancestors who have been stewards of this land long, long before us. Thanks to Boots on the Ground for inviting me here to speak tonight. And thanks to each and every one of you. Y'all could have been anywhere else on the internet right now. You could have been doing any number of things. And you took a great step in working towards justice by joining us here tonight. So thank you. You are welcome here and you are right on time. So some of you on this call may already know about SURJ showing up for racial justice. So if you're a national member, if you have phone banked with SURJ, if you are a circle member or a chapter member, give a little shout out in the chat. We would love to see it. And for those of you who are not familiar, SURJ is the largest organization in the country that explicitly organizes majority white communities for justice. And you might be like, why just white people? So let's answer that. So SURJ particularly works in white communities because of our understanding that white racism is one of the biggest barriers to achieving justice and change in this country. We know that there are too many white people that sit on the sidelines when it comes to racial justice. And there are also so many white people who are struggling and have everything to gain by joining this fight for change. So at SURJ, we move white folks into action for justice alongside people of color to effectively win the things that we all really need. And obviously, not all of us at SURJ are white, but we all believe that white people have a really important role in bringing in and organizing millions of other white folks away from racism and toward justice. So to that end, I would like to thank SURJ National and specifically Grace and Kayla from SURJ National. I would also like to thank Lynn Burnett of Cross Cultural Solidarity, and Heather McGee, a political strategist and New York Times bestselling author of The Sum of Us: What Racism Costs Everyone and How We Can Prosper Together. So this crew that I just mentioned, Kayla, Grace, Lynn, and Heather, they provided a fantastic education and discourse during a SURJ webinar that aired just this past October. And they were talking about some of what we're covering tonight. So if you haven't yet checked out Lynn's content or Heather's book, I highly recommend both of those things. And we are going to drop links in the chat for you. All right, so we are going to roll right into our plan for the evening. So tonight we're going to learn a little political education. We are going to hear personal stories about the important work ahead and why it matters. And then we are going to lay out some steps that each of us can take to affect change for good. And some of what you hear tonight may be new information. It may be familiar. It may make you feel slightly uncomfortable or perhaps really excited. You may find yourself 10 minutes from now feeling really bored because somebody talking to you doesn't feel like action. And I am here to tell you that this right here, what we're doing tonight, this is the work. This is showing up. So just keep that in mind. If you're feeling antsy, feel free to get up and wiggle your legs, take a bio break if you need to, but try not to do multitasking too much. Try to focus in on what you're hearing and absorb that, because this is the kind of information we need to be holding in our hearts. So we ask you to participate tonight from a place of curiosity and goodwill. We ask you to ask thoughtful questions and to move through the world with kindness. We will have time throughout tonight's talk to participate via the chat. But for now, as we get into some political education, I'm going to ask the moderators to turn the chat off for just a little bit.
As we're doing that, I do want to remind everybody that if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. That way it doesn't get mixed in with all of the chat. It's easier for us to see. Meant to mention that. Thank you.
I so appreciate that reminder, Nancy. Thank you. So throughout history, throughout this country's history, there have been a lot of moments when white people have not chosen the side of justice. They have not supported the kinds of things we are trying to work toward. And I imagine it can feel overwhelming or depressing to kind of look back and feel like, man, like, have white people always chosen the wrong side? Like, have we always been doing this? So I want to combat that a little bit. I want to shift that narrative. We are going to start with two stories of white folks who have chosen to show up for justice. One is a story from the past during the civil rights movement, and one is a story from my organizing friend Kayla, someone just like us who felt moved to act and who did. We start with stories to remind us that in the midst of this seemingly impossible circumstance that we are in right now, there are people who have gone before us, and there are people who have gone before us, like our ancestors. There are people right now in our midst who have experienced self-transformation and then as a result have taken action to make change on a much larger scale. So perhaps these are two of the kinds of stories about white people that maybe you would share with your kids or your friends, or maybe you would even recall them and remind yourself of them when you are feeling unsure or needing a little bit of extra hope. So, before we get into the stories, I just kind of want to set this up. Our first story that I'm sharing tonight is of a white ancestor who spoke truth to power in her time. And her name is Constance Curry. A lot of you probably know about Constance Curry, affectionately known as Connie Curry. And before I read the piece from Lynn about Connie Curry, I'm going to begin by just saying something about the power of story. Um, so humans are story-oriented animals. I'm sure all y'all know that. We literally have evolved to be oriented towards story. They help us imagine all kinds of potential scenarios and possibilities, and they also foster a sense of togetherness. And this is a branch off of a much larger evolutionary process at play that helps us practice essential skills in a way that brings us pleasure, such as hunting, finding or creating shelter, bonding, raising a family. And so stories are at the center of our culture and our community. And organizers know that any serious strategy focused on fostering cultures of liberation and achieving a more just and equitable world, we must consider the role that storytelling plays. So we're going to listen to stories, and then I'm going to teach you how to tell stories. That's what we're doing tonight. So that's the work. And a lot of folks are like, maybe thinking like, well, where's the form that I can fill out, or where's the thing that I can go to? A big portion of organizing, in fact, the largest chunk of organizing, is what we call relational organizing. It's understanding our truth, sharing that with others, and inviting folks into this work and getting grounded in that collective liberation. So, and telling stories about white anti-racist history is part of how we share a wider range of how our friends, our family, coworkers, etc., can show up in this world and be positive and liberatory as white folks. So yeah, so that's an important role to play. It's rooted in a sense of legacy. So I want to encourage each of you, as we listen to the story about Connie Curry, to be on the lookout or to listen in and take note of potential lessons that we can learn from Connie. Notice anything that you might relate to or that feels meaningful or relevant. And I will ask you after the story to drop that in the chat. So by the time we get to the end of the story, which is, I don't know, 3-4 minutes at tops, we can get a little glimpse into what this history has meant to us or can mean for us in the future. So Connie. Constance Curry was born into a newly immigrated working class Irish family during the Great Depression. And for the first 10 years of her life, her family was like constantly on the move, chasing work in the textile industry before finally finding a stable job in the mills of Greensboro, North Carolina. And Connie's parents loved to regale the children, Connie and her siblings, with Irish poetry and song. We love song. Song is a form of storytelling too. And these stories of Irish revolutionaries. And so Connie said, or wrote, I should say, "It is clear to me that the Irish struggle got planted deep in my heart and soul at an early age, and that these lessons and music and poetry were easily transferred to the Southern freedom struggle." And the Southern freedom struggle refers to the work that Connie did later in life. So we'll get into that now. So in college, Connie got involved in student organizing with the Progressive National Student Association, or NSA as it was called. In 1953, shortly before the civil rights movement began, she was elected by the NSA to represent students of the South as what was happening was this ferocious white backlash against the civil rights movement. So students of the NSA felt that young white Southerners were ready to chart a more progressive path than their elders. And if they had some support. And so in 1959, the NSA launched the Southern Project, which aimed to build a multiracial network of student supporters of the civil rights movement across the South. And Connie was the project's first director. So in February of 1960, Connie was driving through Greensboro when she heard on the news, local radio, 4 Black college students had been arrested for refusing to leave the Woolworth's lunch counter. And some of you may remember that. And from that moment on, the sit-in movement spread like wildfire, and Connie began to show up. Connie began to show up to witness, to document, and build relationships with other student activists. And so she used her directorship of the Southern Project to spearhead a newsletter about the student movement, which was then distributed through the NSA's national network. Now, maybe that doesn't sound like a big deal in our day and age of social media, but this was before social media. So that was a big deal back then. So this newsletter gave students across the country updates on the violence that their fellow students in the South were facing, things that the news wasn't wanting to cover, and also what the needs of those students were and what local actions could be taken to offer support. So this was huge. Connie's newsletter contributed to a swell of Northern support and laid the foundation for the Northern networks that would later support what was called the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, otherwise known as SNCC. A lot of you have probably heard of SNCC. And so when the sit-in leaders gathered later that year to form SNCC, Connie was one of the few white folks in attendance. And she was soon the first white woman on SNCC's executive committee. So just Connie showed up. That's what she did. She showed up and she observed, and then she sent out information, right? We can do that. Everyday people can do that. And so Connie gave SNCC leaders the keys to her Southern Project office to make use of those resources there. She introduced them to her NSA network and her funding sources. And she even used some of the funding for the Southern Project to directly pay SNCC's bills during its early period. And she never asked permission to do any of this. No one from the NSA questioned her about it either, right? So she just went in and did stuff, and she just made shit happen. Connie Curry stepped away from SNCC in about 1964 as the organization moved away specifically from campus organizing, but she continued to fight for racial justice in powerful ways up until her passing in 2020. So I just want to say, like, here's to standing on the shoulders of our ancestors, right? And so if we can turn the chat back on for folks, that would be amazing. And I would love to know if you have heard something in Connie's story that spoke to you or reminded you of your own story, just drop that in the chat. So I'll share a little bit about myself. Like Connie, my ancestors are Irish, and maybe some of yours are too. Maybe there's some women on this call who are up to what we call good trouble. who ask for forgiveness instead of permission. So drop in the chat whatever's resonating with you, and I would love to read some of that back. Shannon says, I needed to hear that. Even just sharing information is part of doing the work. Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a place in this movement for everyone. Some folks who are disabled, like myself, I'm chronically disabled and sometimes cannot even leave bed. There's stuff that we can still do. Yes, Jamie, I definitely ask for forgiveness rather than permission. Yes, absolutely, Jamie. Who else felt something when they were listening to that story? I'd love to share a couple more things. Yes, I like that she just did stuff, didn't wait on someone else to do it. We need doers, doing the right thing when it doesn't seem like you're doing something natural. Leveraging your skill set. Yes. Showed up. Yes. Observe and be curious, and then sharing with people that might not otherwise hear because they stay away or just didn't think that it was affecting them. Yes. Social storming. Yes. Do what you can, where you can, when you can. This takes courage. I love all of this. Keep it coming, y'all. Oh, this is so awesome. Okay, so that was our in the past story. And so now we're going to hear our in the present story of white people showing up. And while we listen to this, yes, writing and calling for the movement. Heck yes. While we listen to Kayla's story, we'll go ahead and turn the chat off again for just a little bit longer while we listen to Kayla's story. So I'm going to pull that up now. I'm going to share my screen here. Bam, boom. Okay, send request. Request has been sent. Nancy, you may need to give me, there we go. Okay. Continue, screens. All right, y'all. Okay, so we're gonna hear Kayla now. I'm gonna turn this up and let's get going.
My name is Kayla.
Can y'all hear that?
Pronouns. I am in the greater Cleveland area. Thank you for giving me the space to share my story. So I grew up I'm in Ohio now, but I grew up in a small rural town in central Washington. It's a really beautiful place, nestled in a valley, surrounded by mountains. Two rivers meet and divide the town. It's the biggest town in the area. It takes a few hours to get to a city, and it's surrounded by smaller towns where people have to come to my town to go grocery shopping or get serious medical care. The town has changed a lot since I was a kid, but and the local economy has changed and diversified too, but historically, we've always relied really heavily on agriculture. We were once the apple capital of the world, which there are still signs and logos all over the town to remind you that, even though we can't really claim that anymore. This town is still surrounded by orchards of all kinds, apples, cherries, and peaches. And that's reflected in the population, which is mostly white and Latino folks, shaped by the immigration of migrant workers. I am the oldest of 3 kids. I was raised by my single mother after we left my abusive father. We never had much money growing up. And for most of my childhood, we lived in a low-income housing apartment complex. Our neighbors were mostly families headed by other single moms, also adults with disabilities. And growing up in that environment, I saw a lot of struggle, people having a hard time making ends meet, struggling to find childcare, people in cyclical struggles with their mental health. It was very clear that people's basic needs were not being met. Cool. I felt the racial tension between white and Latino students. There was an us versus them mentality that never really made a lot of sense to me. I had friends whose parents were from Mexico and their families were warm and generous. I was invited into their homes, fed, welcomed at gatherings. As I grew older, though, I started hearing more blatant anti-immigrant sentiments. People assumed anyone who was brown, was from Mexico and didn't speak English. Friends who worked after school in grocery stores said that it was only Mexicans who used EBT cards in times of recession. Instead of blaming the corporations that had moved out of the areas for a loss of jobs, people blamed immigrants for taking our jobs. But again, that didn't make a lot of sense to me. Our economy relied on agriculture, and I didn't see white people rushing to take those jobs. One summer during college, I worked in a cherry packing shed, which is a hard job. It's long, monotonous hours on your feet in a cold warehouse. But anyone who applied was hired. They needed tons of workers, so if you put in an application, you'd be hired. But despite that, I was one of the few white workers. Most of my coworkers were immigrants or first or second generation Americans. I worked in a section with a lot of older ladies, and we talked in a mix of broken English and broken Spanish. Even though there was a language barrier, they gave me advice and they bought me tortas from the taco truck during our lunch breaks. Looking back, I realized that the racial tension I grew up with was fueled by the adults in my community who were repeating divisive messages from those in power. My family struggled just like the immigrant families, but instead of uniting together to demand better systems, we were pitted against each other. And we see those same tactics being used today. Now in Cleveland, Ohio, where I live, our politicians like J.D. Vance and our Attorney General are making harmful comments about immigrants that are being amplified at the national level. I see parallels between those attacks and those targeting trans people. This year, my trans sibling moved from Washington to Ohio because they've been struggling with their mental health and needed more support. They couldn't afford to live in Seattle anymore. And even though they didn't have many options, moving to Ohio, a place where our policies are becoming increasingly hostile towards queer and trans people, was like a pretty tough sell for them. And even though I really wanted them here, I do worry about their safety, just like I worry about for immigrants in places like Springfield. I want to live in a community where people's needs are met and everybody feels safe, my sibling, my neighbors, my entire community. And that's why I do this work with SURJ. I want to build a future where these divisive narratives don't have any power, where they lose their power, where people realize that they have more in common than they don't. And that when we build and band together, things get better for everybody. Thank you.
All right, everyone, what do we think about that? Bum, bum. Let's turn the chat back on. I would love to hear from each of you in Kayla's story. What is resonating? Oh my gosh. What is resonating with you? I think for me, like I identify as queer, and that really hit close to home. Is like, imagine, like if I imagine me being in a situation where I couldn't afford to live where I live now and I had to move, and the choice that I had was a place that was actively hostile toward trans and queer folk, that would cause me a lot of grief. That would be scary. So I don't know if anyone else on that call relates to that. Yeah. April, yeah, originally from a small town. You realize pretty early on that division is not necessary and not natural. Yes. Thanks for staying as long as you could, Brandy. Really appreciate you. Yes, Carissa, I love that. Being open despite what she was hearing from adults. Absolutely. Yes, PJ, I totally feel you on that. It is scary. Oh, Lisa, I love that. Happy to see younger people leading trainings. And because like a lot of the stuff that you've done is a little bit with older folks. I got you. Yes. Yes, Kelsey, this is awesome. Hearing the story humanizes folks 100%. That's what everybody needs to be reminded of. Absolutely. I love all these. Keep sharing this. This is amazing. So the stories that y'all just heard about Connie and Kayla and each of our own present day stories, these are vital to this work because in order to really affect change at the scale that we need to affect it at, we have to sink into that humanizing ability that we have. We have to move beyond our guilt and our shame of having this white privilege and really find our own personal stake in this work. Work like what Connie did with the NSA and this in SNCC, work like what Kayla does at SURJ. And so we call this personal stake our shared interest. That is like a technical organizing term. And this is important because this is what keeps us grounded in the work. It keeps us coming back to it. It keeps us stable. It keeps us balanced. If we want to do this for the long haul, we have to maintain that. So that's why this is an important part of the work. And some of you on the call tonight might already be familiar with the idea of shared interest. And when you find your own shared interest, you can root your own work not in helping people of color out of saviorism, right? But in helping yourself and helping those around you, your family, and owning your own stake in that work, in what you and what other white people have to gain by joining movements for justice. Because racism affects us all. And if you have read Heather McGhee's book that I mentioned at the top of this call, she has this really amazing metaphor that she talks about, the swimming pool. During racial segregation, there were all of these public pools that Black folks didn't have access to. And so read that book. It goes into, we don't have time to get into a lot of that right now, but it goes into, the fact that racism affects everybody. Because what did they do once segregation ended and there was this Civil Rights Act and the pools were desegregated? They closed the pools. Nobody got to swim, right? So that's how racism hurts us all. The name of the book is The Sum of Us. Thank you. Oh, Martha, go ahead and repost that to everyone because I think that accidentally just went to me. That is the name of the book. It's amazing. So we'll link that in the chat again. Good question, Tony. Okay, so dun, 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 dun. So the reality is nearly everyone, except, of course, for those at the very, very top, heck those people, regardless of race, will be better off in a society that has the things that people of color-led movements have been, and still are calling for. And I'm talking about things like better schools and housing, a living wage, unions, access to organizing, right? And representation, real investment in our communities. All of us deserve those things. So today, on the 100th day of Trump's presidency, and on the eve of May Day, International Workers' Day, it is painfully apparent that Trump, that Musk, their billionaire cronies, and the current inept administration are doing everything they can to dismantle and eliminate these critical resources, and they are blaming it on Black and brown people, trans people, disabled people, and using these folks as scapegoats to cover for their own immoral and criminal acts. So we are getting grounded together tonight in our collective and our individual shared interest in order to fight back against these fascists. And I'm going to show you right now just how to do that. So we're going to get into journaling. So we're going to move into some journaling so that we can find our own shared interest and create our stories. And we're going to begin to outline our stories. We're going to take some time to personally reflect and try to identify a specific experience or story that reveals our own shared interest in this moment. And so, and mods, go ahead just so that we can get really clear on the instruction here. Do me a favor. Let's pause on the chat for just a second because I've got some instruction for each of you. If you have it handy, grab a pen and paper or pull up on your computer a Word doc or whatever you want. Something just to jot some notes down in. So we're gonna take some time to personally reflect, try to identify a specific experience. And when we're trying to get in touch with the story that we want to explore, the story that you want to explore, remember that it is personal. It contains your emotions, your memories, and meaning. And by meaning, I mean what matters to you. This, what we call the secret sauce, right? It is vulnerable. We are taking action not to be good or to help others, but because it calls our full humanity into being. And we want to be specific. It may seem counterintuitive, I know, but the more specific the story is, and the more specific that meaning is for you, the more universally it actually connects with others. And here's a few things about what a shared interest story is not. Okay, it's not a political analysis or manifesto. It is not a high-level view. It is not abstract or jargon. It is not an interpretation of or its own theory. And it's not a book review or a summary of a really good podcast. We're not writing about what somebody else is saying. We're speaking from within our hearts. So what we're going to do now is we are going to, I'm going to share my screen in just a minute, and and it's going to have some prompts for topics, some topic prompts listed to help kind of get our minds thinking, those gears spinning. And if you are reading that list and one of the prompts just doesn't resonate with you, don't worry about it. Just skip it. Keep reading and move on to something that does. So for now, I'm going to share my screen and just look for one thing on this list that you could write about that relates to your own personal experience. Okay, so let me pull this document up and I will share my screen. Give me just a second here. Bow, bow, bow. Share screen. I may only be in my 30s, but I'm still a little slow when it comes to technology, you guys. Okay. Okay. So let me bump up this let me learn how to say words. Oh my gosh. Let me bump up the Zoom here so that you can read this easily. Tools.
If you hit the green button in the corner, it might make it full screen. I don't know.
The green button in the corner. Okay, let me try.
Up, in the up left, top.
Oh, that's just annotating. Give me just a second. That is not what I want. View. Zoom. Oh my gosh, there we go. Okay, sorry, y'all. Blurp. I'm a millennial, I promise. I can do technology. All right, so some of these prompts include healthcare in the US medical system. I know, yes, please laugh, react. It's totally cool. I'm also your comedic relief for tonight. The defunding and the political attacks on public education, AKA book bans. Another prompt could be the erosion of workers' rights and protections in favor of profits for, the few at the top. The attack on bodily autonomy and gendered violence, queer and trans issues, housing, the gutted social safety net, and the decline in public systems, cultures of perfectionism. Oh, moral injury, being complicit in an unjust system. That is a complex topic. That I get the feels. If any of you have read or done the workbook, Me and White Supremacy, you know what that's about. Loss of connection to culture, ancestry, or powerful historic traditions due to our whiteness. Yes. Environmental pollution, criminalization instead of support, climate change, Yeah, there's some really great prompts here. So take a look at these, pick one, and then we're going to move into the second part of this. Give everyone just a few more seconds here. All right, so hopefully you found a prompt topic that kind of resonates with you. And we're going to drop a link in the chat that includes reflection questions related to each of these topics. So mods, go ahead and drop a link to that document in the chat if you don't mind. And what you'll do in this document is you'll scroll down to your selected topic and you'll read the questions related to that topic. And I want to stress, don't feel pressured to answer every question on the list. Just explore ones or pick a couple ones that are useful for you and ignore the ones that aren't, okay? And then if you are generally struggling to get started, or if the questions aren't really speaking to you, we've got a few more additional prompts that we're going to drop in the chat that can help you expand your reflections. And so those will hit the chat in just a second here. And now we're going to take about 5 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes, and we're just going to write. And it doesn't have to be in full sentences. You're not writing the final story. Just anything that comes to mind about this issue or anything that that prompt question elicits, just jot down notes. We're just creating a rough outline right now. Just something to kind of get our brains thinking. So I'll turn a little music on. It won't have words, so y'all can do just a little bit of journaling, and then when that song is over, we'll come back together. Minute, y'all. So let's come back, folks. Pause my music here. All right, great. Okay, so dun dun dun. Sorry, lost my little paper here. Give me just a second. Okay, so you've got your prompt now, and you've got a little bit of time that you've spent thinking about this. So we're gonna wrap this up, and I'm gonna send you with some homework. Before I do that, someone asked a really great question in the Q&A. Chuck asked the great question. Can you share a real life example of having shared a story of this kind? And like, what was the impact? Absolutely, I can. Yeah, 100%. So here's my story. Real quick. My story is that I've been organizing with the Kansas City chapter of SURJ since 2016. And early on, I was invited to create a mass meeting presentation that talked about racism in the queer community. And I put this amazing slide deck together. I was really proud about the stats that I had found. It felt like really solid and well put together. And I am giving this presentation, and there's really great attendance. And we had folks from all walks of life. We had white folks who were new to the movement. We had my queer friends. There were trans women of color there, Black trans women there. And at the end of the presentation, one of those Black women comes up to me and she says, you know what? I came here today because I expected to, I expected to hear about racism in Kansas City and how it's affecting us, and how we're getting killed on the streets and it's not safe for us to live in our own city. And what you just talked about was intellectual nonsense. It was meaningless. It has nothing to do with our experience. And she said that hurt. That hurt me really bad. And that was a pivotal moment for me. That was a pivotal moment for me because it helped me understand that what I should have been doing is listening to the other stories of the people around me, taking those in and observing and asking questions, and then helping get those out to more people, right? And instead, I was spending all my time looking online at Instagram content creators. And that was meaningless. It meant nothing. It did nothing for our community. So that's my story. To share with you that the work that really matters is the personal work, the stuff that we're doing right here tonight. This is what matters. And so that's my encouragement to you. We all make mistakes, we all mess up, but that's why this storytelling, finding our own shared interest, is so important. You know, it's like I could have been talking that whole time about like, what can we as Kansas Cityans do to show up for our Black trans women in Kansas City? You know, so we're doing it now, but it took me a minute to get there. So that's what's up with that. Okay, so we're going to drop a thing in the chat, and mods, let's drop that in the chat, the shared interest storytelling circle meeting exercise. So I just want to preface this document that you're about to receive was created originally for like a group meeting called the Gear Up Circle that SURJ created this program for. You can use this individually. You can use it with a group of friends. Share it with a group of friends. Do it together. This is going to be great. You have already completed part 1 of that exercise, so way to go. What I want you to do now is take your calendars out, and I want you to I literally want you to look at your calendars right now and find a window of at least 30 minutes sometime over the next 3 to 5 days where you can sit down uninterrupted and work through the rest of the exercise in the document that was just linked in the chat. Click that link and open it up. You could even make a coffee date out of it with a friend or a small group, y'all. Get creative. Send it to them ahead of time. Everything else that we've shared tonight, the links for the exercises is linked in that document. So you've got those links, and we'll also send a follow-up email probably, or post a follow-up post on the website so that you can grab these links. And so I want you to drop in the chat right now, like literally, what day and time are you planning on doing this? Like, tell me, and who are you going to invite to join? Drop that in the chat right now. We've just got a few minutes left. And while folks are doing that, I just want to say we're coming up on the end of our hour together, and I have a big ask of all of you. Hell yeah, May 8th at 2 p.m. I have a big ask to make of each of you. We need you to show up in full force tomorrow for May Day, to show the world that we are May Day strong, right? May Day, also known as International Workers' Day, commemorates the struggles and gains made by workers and the labor movement. And it's observed in so many countries with demonstrations and rallies in support of workers, like all across the globe. And you know what? This day has its roots in the labor movement of the late 19th century in the United States. It started here, and we have forgotten some of our history. Our Labor Day is in September. So guess what? It was first celebrated in 1886 as part of the struggle for the 8-hour workday. I'm sure some of you know that. This might be new information to some others. So this year, tomorrow, we must be stronger than ever in how we show up. We are not backing down, and we will fight for the things that we deserve, like better schools, safe and affordable housing, a living wage, a stable economy, affordable goods, representation, and real investment in our communities. And so we're dropping a link in the chat right now where you can find May Day events that are happening tomorrow and through the weekend near you. So click that link, maydaystrong.org, go there, click the join an event, and view the map and find that event near you and register for that event and show up. And make no mistake, the recent legislation, the violent arrests and deportations happening around the US, they have been designed to scare us and deter us from acting. And we cannot afford to remain complacent, not now, not ever. We must act, and we must continue to act. So join a rally in your area tomorrow if you can, this weekend. And I challenge those of you at those events to introduce yourself to another attendee and ask them what inspired them to show up. What inspired you to show up today? Share with them what's been inspiring you to show up. Use the information that you just journaled about today to talk about that experience. And so regardless of whether or not you can make it to an upcoming event in person, we invite you to get more involved with SURJ and to build on the work that you have started tonight. Each of your stories are a powerful tool that you can use every single day to inspire others and to invite them into the work alongside thousands of people across the country. And you can join SURJ at our next mass call. It's virtual on May 7th by going to surj.org/Mayday. And we're going to drop that link in the chat, surj.org/Mayday, all one word. I want to thank each and every one of you for being here tonight. for sharing space, and for creating community. And lastly, I want to thank again Boots on the Ground. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Martha. I feel so blessed to be working in concert with you all. And so as you leave, feel free to drop in the chat one word that you are carrying with you. For me, I am carrying the word resolve. That is my word. Let me know what your word is.